I was never the kind of person who believed in omens. I always thought that whole feeling a strange vibe thing was just paranoia. But looking back, maybe I should have paid more attention to that uneasy feeling on moving day. It was a cold morning in Seattle. After a tough divorce, all I wanted was a bit of peace. I found a small house on a quiet street, surrounded by tall trees and neighbors who seemed to keep their distance. It was exactly what I was looking for: silence. I spent the first few days unpacking boxes, trying to settle in. The noises in the new house were still unfamiliar: creaks in the floor, pops in the walls, but nothing out of the ordinary. I was starting to feel at home. It was on the third day that I noticed the man next door. He was leaning on the fence that separated our backyards, just watching me as I watered some plants left behind by the previous tenant. He didn't say anything, just stared. I figured maybe he was shy or just curious. The next morning, he showed up with a cake wrapped in aluminum foil, said it was a welcome gift. His smile was too wide, stretched, and when he shook my hand, he squeezed a little harder than necessary. But I thanked him, because that's how I was raised to be polite. That night, I kept thinking about how his eyes didn't match the rest of his face. His smile said, "Welcome to the neighborhood," but his eyes, they looked hungry. I wanted to believe it was just my imagination. I wanted to believe I was being dramatic, but I had no idea what was still to come. In the days that followed, he started showing up more often, always with some kind of excuse. One day it was to ask if I'd seen his cat. The next, he said he found some of my mail in the wrong mailbox, even though it clearly had my name and correct address on it. I started noticing things I had previously ignored, like how he was almost always outside, supposedly tending to his garden, yet never actually doing anything. Just standing there with the hose running, staring in the direction of my house. Sometimes when I closed the living room curtain, he was still there, motionless. One afternoon, I came back from the grocery store and found the trash bin in my garage open. Inside was a bag I had thrown out the day before, but it had been rummaged through. Clothes I had donated were scattered on the ground. I figured it must have been an animal. Or at least, that's what I tried to believe. Things started getting stranger when I realized how much he knew about my routine. He'd casually mention that I always left for a walk at 8 a.m, or that sometimes I kept the kitchen light on late. I had never told him any of that. I remember one night when I left the living room window open, just the curtains swaying in the breeze. I was on the couch watching a movie when I heard someone cough outside. It was a short, muffled cough. I got up slowly and walked to the window. I didn't see anyone, but the feeling of being watched was suffocating. I still tried to rationalize it. Maybe he's just a little eccentric. Maybe he's lonely. But deep down, something inside me was screaming. Something told me this wasn't normal. It was on a rainy early morning that everything started to spiral out of control. I woke up to a low sound, barely audible. Something like a creak or scratching coming from my bedroom window. I lay there frozen, trying to convince myself it was just the wind, but the sound kept going. It was a soft, repetitive motion, like someone dragging their fingernails across the glass. I got up slowly, silently, and walked to the window. The curtain was closed, but the streetlight cast a faint shadow on the fabric. And there, for a moment, I swear I saw the silhouette of a head. Someone was outside. Standing still, watching, I yanked the curtain open. But when I looked, no one was there. Just the wet garden and the cold gleam of the damp sidewalk. I stood there for a while, waiting for some movement. Nothing. The next morning, I went out to the yard. In the soil, near the window, I saw footprints. They were fresh, still defined despite the early morning rain. And the most disturbing part, they were facing directly toward the window. Someone had stood there long enough to leave deep marks in the mud. The days that followed were a mix of vigilance and anxiety. I started sleeping with the lights on. locked every window, installed an extra lock on the back door. And still, the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. One night, as I walked through the house, I saw something that froze me. At the living room window, through the gaps in the curtain, I saw two eyes, clearly two eyes staring at me. The face vanished the moment I stepped closer. I ran to the door and locked it tight. I called the police. They came, walked around the block, but didn't find anyone. When I mentioned my neighbor, one of the officers just said, "Yeah, he's a weird one, but he's never done anything." As if that was supposed to make me feel better. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat on the bedroom floor, back against the wall, listening to every sound in the house. Because deep down I knew he was close. I needed proof, something concrete. Because no matter how much every part of me screamed that I was right, no one seemed to take me seriously. The police kept saying that without catching him in the act, without an actual assault, there wasn't much they could do, and that only made me feel even more vulnerable. So I bought a simple security camera, one of those with motion detection and night vision. I installed it discreetly on the window frame facing the backyard. I hooked it up to my phone and went to bed that night with my heart racing, as if I already knew what was coming. And I was right. At 3:14 a.m. the camera's alarm went off. I woke up to the phone vibrating with a notification. My hands were shaking as I opened the video. The first second of the recording showed nothing but darkness and the sound of rain. In the next second, he appeared, the neighbor, slowly emerging from the side of my house, holding a small flashlight. He was wearing a raincoat, but his face was visible, and the look in his eyes, it was blank. He didn't look like he was fully there. He walked up to the window and got so close the camera captured every detail of his face. And then he did something that froze me in place. He pressed his lips against the glass, stayed like that for a few seconds, then whispered something. I couldn't make it out, but he was clearly saying my name. Repeated it a few times. My name like some twisted prayer. And then he left, just like that. Vanished into the darkness as if he had never been there. I sat on my bed, frozen, phone in hand, the video playing on a loop. It was real. I wasn't imagining it. It wasn't paranoia. He was hunting me. The next day, I went to the police station. I showed them the video. The officer watched it, expression serious. He nodded and said that now, yes, this was trespassing, and there was enough to file a report. But he also warned me, it'll take a while to get any kind of protective order. You can try a restraining order, but that takes time. Time was the one thing I didn't have. I went back home feeling more helpless than ever. Because now I knew it was real. And worse, he knew I knew. When I moved into that old building, I wasn't expecting much. It was old, damp, and the hallways smelled like mildew. But the rent was cheap, and after a string of forced moves, all I wanted was quiet, peace. The apartment was small, with a single window in the living room that faced the building's inner courtyard. Directly across from it, almost perfectly aligned, was another window, apartment 206. At first, everything seemed normal. The window of 206 was always partially covered by a curtain, an easy detail to overlook. But over time, I began to notice how that small gap never changed. Even in the middle of the night, the opening remained, still, untouched, like someone never forgot to leave it exactly that way. That's when I started to realize what once felt like a meaningless detail turned into a discomfort. That window seemed to stare at me. I can't explain it, but there was a weight coming from it. Something unmoving, constant, always there. Sometimes at night, I'd turn on the living room light and instinctively glance across. And there it was, the same gap, the same dark void beyond the glass. But at certain moments, it felt like there was something behind it, a still shape, hard to define. a kind of motionless presence. I started keeping my curtains closed, but the feeling didn't go away. It was as if something was watching me through the walls, even when I couldn't see it directly. The paranoia kept growing. And then, one random morning, it occurred to me to ask the building manager about the neighbor in 206. The answer was unsettling. The apartment was empty. No one had lived there for months. Since that day, I haven't been able to look at that window without feeling my stomach turn. That's when the notes started. Small pieces of paper slipped under my door, carefully folded, unsigned. There was no aggression in them, at least nothing overt. They were observations, notes, comments far too mundane to be harmless. It was as if someone was slowly documenting my life. At first, small details about my routine, the time I usually turned on the kitchen light. Then, mentions of what I ate, the sounds I listened to. Everything described with precision, almost like the notes of a study. At first, I tried to rationalize. Maybe someone was watching me from the hallway. Maybe a nosy neighbor or a janitor with too much time on their hands. But the more the notes appeared, the more intimate they became. And what haunted me the most wasn't the content itself, but the fact that it was always right, always, every detail checked out. Even the ones I didn't think anyone could possibly know. Like how I sometimes woke up in the middle of the night and just stood there, frozen, staring at the ceiling, unable to fall back asleep. That kind of thing would show up on paper the next day. I started to suspect everything, everyone. My windows, locked. My doors, checked over and over again each night. But nothing could stop the feeling that someone was closer than they should be. There were nights when I was certain I was being watched. Not from the outside, from within. As if something in the air of the living room vibrated with eyes I couldn't see. By then, it didn't matter if someone was actually in 206 or not. The presence was inside me, and it knew that I knew. I tried to ignore it. Tried to convince myself that it was all just in my head. But the more I tried to get back to my routine, the more the small things felt off. And it was always the small things that hurt the most. Marks started appearing on objects. Things I could have sworn I left one way and found changed the next morning. The living room curtain, which always closed completely, was slightly folded at the edges, like someone had peeked through it from the inside. A glass on the counter I didn't remember using. The hand towel hanging on the wrong side. There were no signs of forced entry. No noise, no evidence, but I knew. I started taking photos of the apartment every night before bed. A record, maybe to convince myself that I was still in control, but even that failed. In one of the pictures, a framed photo on the shelf was face down. The next day, when I checked, it was upright again, but at an odd angle that didn't match the others. As if someone had tried to put it back without knowing exactly how it had been. I told a few people. Half smiles, empty advice. I was told I needed to rest, that it was just stress, that everyone goes through phases like this. But no one saw. No one understood. Because no one else was being slowly erased by someone who never showed themselves. The walls began to feel narrower, the nights longer, the silence heavier. That's when I decided to leave. I didn't tell anyone. I just packed everything in silence, deep into the night. No plans, I just wanted distance. An end. But on that last night, just before I locked the door, I found a folded note on my bed. And this time, it wasn't under the door. It was inside. In my space. In my place. The note was short. A white sheet, folded with surgical precision, just like the others. But this time, the handwriting was different, firmer, as if the author, hidden until now, had finally decided to reveal themselves in their clearest form. The message wasn't threatening. It didn't ask for anything. It didn't scream. It was just a cold reminder. You can change houses, but I know the way you breathe. I sat on the edge of the bed, the note in my hands, and stayed there for hours. The boxes were already packed. The morning light had begun to slip through the cracks in the window, but I couldn't move. In that moment, I understood that the fear wasn't about him anymore. It was mine. There was no evidence. No camera had captured anything useful. No witnesses. No answers. Apartment 206 remained officially empty. No sound. No visits. Just that curtain. Eternally half open, even after I left. Today, I live somewhere else. A new city. A different routine. But sometimes at night, I hear faint creaks above the ceiling. Paused. Precise. Almost like footsteps. And every now and then, I receive envelopes with no return address. Inside them, blank sheets of paper. No writing. No handwriting. But with that same smell of old paper. And always folded the exact same way. I woke up to the vibration of my phone on the nightstand, like always. But what wasn't normal was the number of notifications. Hundreds. My Instagram was blowing up. Missed calls, messages from people I hadn't spoken to in ages. Even my digital ethics professor had left a "Are you okay?" on WhatsApp. Right then, my stomach dropped. I tapped the notifications, and my heart started racing as the messages all echoed the same tone in different words. "Have you seen this? I can't believe it's you. Is this real? I thought you were different." I opened the first link. It was a video. An anonymous upload on a site I'd never visited before, but it looked like so many others that host adult content. The thumbnail alone froze me for a few seconds. It was my face, or at least it looked like it. I hit play. The image loaded slowly, like my phone somehow knew this wasn't something I should be watching. When it started, my first reaction was to deny it, to say, "That's not me." But the image was identical. The expression, the way of speaking, even my room in the background. Same bedsheet, same lamp, but the content. It was grotesque, vulgar. And the most disturbing part, the version of me on screen looked comfortable, smiling, interacting with whoever was on the other side. I paused the video before it finished. My hands were shaking. I tried to remember any situation that could have led to this. Some intimate video? Something leaked? But I had never recorded anything like that. Nothing even close. Nothing anywhere. And yet, there it was, circulating, shared, watched by thousands of people, with my name, my face, my life. I rushed to social media, tried to understand how far it had gone. There were screenshots, clips, people commenting like they knew me intimately. Some doubted it was really me, but they were the minority. Most seemed completely convinced, saying it was just her true self showing. That no one's a saint, that I always suspected her. It felt like being stripped naked in a public square. And the worst part, I had never even exposed myself. I spent hours trying to report the video. The site had no support. It was a place full of ghosts, where victims scream, but no one listens. And predators laugh behind anonymous profiles and fake logins. Reality set in slowly. This wasn't a mistake. It was an attack. Something built. Someone had done this on purpose. And they knew exactly how to hit me. It wasn't just about the video. It was about what would come next. The video didn't leave my mind for even a second. By the end of the first day, 2 new versions had already surfaced, edited more aggressively, with zoom-ins and captions created by people who seemed eager to feed the spectacle even more. Strangers began tagging me in posts. Offensive comments, jokes, insinuations. It was like, overnight I'd become a public figure. In a nightmare I never wrote, I watched the video again. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to understand. I paused it frame by frame, analyzing every detail. Every blink, every mouth movement. It was my face, but something was off. At one specific moment, The head moved in a strange way, almost imperceptibly, like the image had been pulled. The reflection in the mirror behind the bed was slightly out of sync. The eyes didn't blink at the same time. I saw it. It was fake. A simulation. I don't know if it was relief or fear that hit me harder. Relief that I wasn't losing my mind. Fear because someone had gone to the trouble of fabricating that. I spent hours researching. Deepfake. I'd heard of it, of course, but never imagined I could be a victim. The level of detail was terrifying. It looked too real. Someone had used my image to create a video that could fool even people who knew me well. I reached out for help. A tech-savvy friend analyzed the video and confirmed my suspicions. It wasn't real, but it also wasn't simple. This wasn't something anyone could whip up with a phone app. It was a sophisticated, time-consuming job. What disturbed me the most was this. To make it that accurate, someone had to have a lot of material on me. Videos, audio, facial expressions, angles of my room, maybe even samples of my voice. And then the question started pounding in my head. How did someone get all of that? My profile had always been private. I never posted anything intimate. No long videos, no detailed shots of my room. You couldn't recreate what I saw in that deepfake from social media photos alone. I started combing through my old posts, archived stories, even the most innocent ones. And even searching carefully, I found nothing that could explain that level of replication. That's when something inside me snapped. The only explanation that made sense was the scariest one. That wasn't made using just public images. Whoever was behind it had been watching me. I started suspecting everything around me. My devices felt slower. The camera on my laptop, even covered with a sticker, bothered me more than ever. My phone heated up when I wasn't using it. Some notifications flashed and disappeared too quickly. I installed apps to detect remote access. Ran scans. Traces of external connections popped up. Camera access. Microphone access. Strange timestamps, usually in the middle of the night, when I was asleep, when I was most vulnerable. The ground disappeared beneath my feet. It wasn't just a fake video. It was a reenactment of my life. And someone out there was writing the next chapters, using my image as their puppet. I started avoiding mirrors, deleted my social media, changed all my passwords, wiped my devices, uninstalled every app I could. I did everything right. At least everything any online safety guide would tell you to do, but nothing changed. Because the videos kept coming. Every 2 or 3 days, a new one would appear. Always the same aesthetic. My face, my room, my body, my voice. But the words weren't mine. The stories weren't mine. The actions were ones I'd never choose. The worst part was when the details started lining up too well with my real life. In one video, I was holding a book I had just bought the day before. In another, the background showed a painting I'd hung only a few days earlier. One no one had seen, not even in photos, not online. I started wondering if someone had been inside my home, if I'd been followed, if something had been installed here. And the most desperate question, if they were still here. I barely slept. Kept lights on. Changed clothes in the bathroom with the door locked, as if that would make any difference. Fear spread into every corner. The feeling of living on a stage built by invisible hands was suffocating. I installed cameras at home, 3 of them. One in the living room, one in the bedroom, and one facing the kitchen window. I reviewed the first night's footage the next morning. Everything seemed calm until around 2:43 a.m. in the bedroom, something made my blood run cold. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't a shadow. It was the camera's movement. It turned on its own, like someone was controlling it remotely. It followed me while I slept. At the end of the recording, there was a soft metallic click. Slow. A sound coming from near the door. Like a key turning. I took the footage to the police. They watched. Listened. Took notes. Told me that without a clear break-in, there was nothing they could do. No direct threat, no identity, no face, just digital paranoia. They referred me to a psychologist. I left the station feeling more invisible than ever. And still, I knew someone was watching me. I knew there was a mind behind all of it. That there was intent. It wasn't just about defaming or hurting me. It was more than that. It was control. In the latest video, I was crying. Silently, with empty eyes, apologizing. It was long, almost 6 minutes. A single shot, no cuts, like a theater scene. I spoke words I didn't recognize. Phrases no one had ever taught me. I confessed to things I never lived. Took the blame for sins I never committed. And in the background, someone was playing the piano. None of the previous videos had music. This was staged. When the video ended, I noticed the file name wasn't random like before. It had a title, Scene 8 Final Take. After the video with the piano, everything escalated. It felt like I was trapped in something I never agreed to be part of. Being led through a script I didn't write. But someone else seemed to know better than I did. A new video was posted. Not on the same obscure site as before, but on a more popular platform. And it was different. The editing was sharper, the image cleaner, the words more intimate, as if whoever was directing this content was now closer. In the new recording, I walked through my house. Like in a documentary, my face looked tired, my voice softer. I spoke about how fame had destroyed me, how I deserved everything that was happening, how he was right to show me who I really was. Every line felt like a knife stabbing at parts of my identity I didn't even know were vulnerable. It wasn't just about using my image, it was an attempt to reprogram me, to rewrite who I was, like each new video was slowly erasing pieces of my real memory, my truth. I began receiving direct messages on a new email account I had created strictly for emergencies. That email had never been shared. And yet, the messages started arriving, not from random people, but from profiles with names that sounded generic. Director Zero, Ghost _206, Real Anonymous. The messages weren't insults, no clear threats. They were compliments. And they all seemed to come from the same source. You're performing so well. The lighting in the last video looked perfect on your face. Your expression of fear is the most beautiful one yet. I was never in that place. I never spoke those lines. I never felt those emotions in the way they were portrayed. But somehow, it all felt real. As if the person behind the camera wasn't just watching me, but shaping me, directing, using my image as a living canvas for their own film. And then came the worst part, a notification on my phone. A video sent via private link. A file that wasn't hosted on any known site. It looked freshly recorded. I recognized the location before I even hit play, the front of my grandmother's house, where I had spent the previous weekend. A place I had never taken photos of, never posted. A space I thought was untouched. The video showed someone walking down the street. Camera at shoulder height. The sound of footsteps. The image approaching the gate, then the door. The viewfinder clearly showing the doorbell. The lens zooming in, as if trying to capture the details of the lock. And then, a black screen. At the end, a single phrase blinked in the corner of the screen. You're going to film the ending with me. I didn't respond to the message. I didn't report it. I didn't scream. Because some part of me understood, with brutal clarity, that none of it would make a difference. I blocked everything. Deleted everything. Erased myself, piece by piece. Disappeared from social media, changed my number, severed connections. Like someone trying to hide from their own reflection. I moved, alone, without telling anyone. I chose a remote place, with no close neighbors. Found a remote job, stopped using my real name for anything. I became a shadow, living among the remains of a life that once felt safe. And for a few weeks, I almost believed it had worked. The silence felt artificial, but it was still silence. I started sleeping better. Let myself take walks in the afternoon, shop with more ease. I even started listening to music again, little by little, as if rebuilding my voice, note by note. Until one morning, I found a new email, no subject, no sender. Just one video attachment named final_version.mp4. It took me 3 hours to open it. 3 hours staring at the screen, too afraid to click. 3 hours to accept that no matter how far I ran, this would still find me. I hit play. The image loaded slowly, frame by frame. The video opened with a slow pan across a house. My new house. The video had been recorded from outside. The camera shook slightly, as if handheld. The lens crept toward the fence, the gate, the living room window. It showed my car, my plants, the hallway light still on. Then, darkness, and a new scene. From inside. The camera was positioned in what looked like the corner of the living room. It captured the sofa, the table, the back door. And there I was, sleeping, completely exposed like it was a normal, authorized recording. I didn't move. Time seemed frozen. At one point, my body shifted slightly, and it's as if something inside me, in the video, sensed the presence. My neck turned. My eyes opened. Slowly, calmly, I looked directly into the lens and smiled. That expression wasn't mine. That wasn't me. But it was in my body. The recording ended with a black screen. No sound, just one sentence in small letters in the bottom right corner. Now you're perfect. I shut the laptop without thinking. Yanked out the cables, turned off the modem, but it was all just theater. Instinct. Because the truth was, by then, it was already too late. The house was too quiet. I stood slowly, moved through the rooms, checked doorknobs, locks. Everything was in place, but nothing felt right. It was the same feeling as walking into a room seconds after someone's left. The air still held the breath of another presence. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, and wrote this story. Here, in this forum, as one last attempt to tell what happened, or what's happening. I don't expect help, or even an audience. I just want it documented, somewhere on the internet he hasn't erased yet. And if one day you see my face in a video somewhere, smiling, saying everything's fine, that I've moved on, that it was all just a misunderstanding, don't believe it. That's not me. It never was. You know that feeling of being watched, even when no one's around? I never gave it much thought. Not until I started working at that company. It was my second official job. An administrative position in an old building, but a well-kept one. The kind of place that feels frozen in time. Dark carpets, beige walls, the smell of burnt coffee, and a constant hush. It felt safe. At first, on my first day, I was greeted by a friendly receptionist who gave me a tour of the floor. I remember clearly how she mentioned someone named Roberto. He's quiet, but a good guy, she said. I didn't think much of it, until I saw who he was. Roberto worked in the archives department, tucked away in a dimly lit room at the end of the hallway. He always wore long-sleeved shirts, even in the heat, and rarely spoke. But there was something about his eyes, a way of looking that didn't feel absent-minded. It was intense, like he was trying to memorize every detail about me. At first, I thought it was just in my head. There's always someone a bit eccentric at work. But as the days went by, I started noticing a pattern. He was always in the break room at the same time as me. If I changed my schedule, he'd still show up. If I went out to lunch, he'd suddenly appear at the same cafe. Sometimes I'd glance to the side, and there he was, silent, watching me, with an expression I couldn't quite read. One time, while waiting for the bus, I caught his reflection in the shelter's glass. He was across the street, standing still with his arms crossed, staring right at me. And when I turned to look, He was gone, like he had vanished into thin air. That night, I got home and tried to laugh it off. "You're being paranoid, Lusa," I said out loud. But deep down, that twist in my gut, that tension in my shoulders, something told me this wasn't just coincidence. That's when I started to realize he knew where I was. All the time. After that day at the bus stop, I started paying closer attention. I took notes on times, places, any patterns. But no matter how hard I tried to find a logic, he was always one step ahead. Like he could anticipate my moves. I changed my departure routine. Started taking alternate routes, eating lunch at different times, even altered my walk to the bus stop, and still, he showed up. Sometimes we'd accidentally cross paths, and he'd say a flat mechanical, "Good afternoon," void of emotion. Other times he didn't speak at all, just stared, with that same blank face and eyes that looked like they were devouring everything they saw. I stopped sharing things at work, avoided posting on social media. I locked my profile, removed photos, deleted apps, and still, he seemed to know. One morning, he walked past me and murmured, "I like your hair better down." That day, I hadn't posted anything. No one knew I'd had it up until I got to the office. That froze me to the core. Things got worse that Friday. It was raining, and since the bus was late, I decided to walk back to the building's entrance. When I reached my car, there was a note clipped under the windshield wiper. "You look beautiful in that blue blouse." My heart nearly stopped. I was wearing a blue blouse. I looked around. The parking lot was empty. I looked up. No cameras, no guard in sight. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? He hadn't touched me, hadn't made a direct threat. But that note, that sentence, it was worse than a scream. It was a constant presence, silent, invisible. And now it was stepping into my space. And that's when I started feeling real fear. Fear of sleeping. Fear of waking up. Fear that, one day, he'd decide watching wasn't enough. After the note on my car, something in me shifted. That feeling of being watched stopped being just an unsettling thought and became a real threat. I couldn't ignore it anymore. On Monday, I asked to work remotely for a few days, claiming a health issue. I made up a constant headache, something no one could prove or question. I needed distance. But even at home, peace didn't come. On the third night, I woke around 3 AM to a sharp clink, the sound of metal tapping glass. I rushed to the living room window and through the curtains saw someone standing on the sidewalk across the street. Tall, still, hands in pockets. I couldn't make out the face, but the build, it looked just like Roberto. The next day, I bought a security camera, installed it discreetly, facing the front gate. I couldn't sleep until I'd checked the recordings at least 10 times. The following morning, I reviewed the footage. At 2:58 AM, the sensor triggered. The image shook slightly in the wind, but it was clear. Someone was approaching the gate. The face was just out of the light's reach, but you could see them fiddling with the lock, calmly, unhurried, like they had all the time in the world. In the end, the figure simply turned around and walked away down the street, as if nothing had happened. I rushed to the police station, showed them the video. The officer watched in silence, and when it ended, he sighed. No ID, no break-in. It's not enough to file a criminal report. Could have just been a drunk neighbor. I just stood there speechless. He handed me the flash drive with an awkward smile, the kind that says, "Sorry, but you're on your own." The following week, I went back to work. I tried my best to avoid Roberto, but it was like he knew. He started coming by my department more often, sometimes just to grab a sheet of paper, a pen, any excuse. Until one day, I caught him standing near my desk when I got back late from lunch. Hands in his pockets, staring at my computer screen, turned off. He acted surprised when he saw me. "Oh, thought I left something here. You don't work on this floor. Just curious. Wanted to see what it's like here." And then he walked off like it was nothing. That night I went straight home. Locked everything. Checked windows, curtains, lights. Even so, I had a horrible nightmare. I was inside the house, and he walked in through the back door. Didn't say a word. Just stared while I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I woke up drenched in sweat. Went to the kitchen for some water and froze on the spot. The laundry room window was open. I was absolutely sure I had closed it. No signs of forced entry, no broken glass, no marks. But on the counter, there was a single wet footprint, barefoot, and I never walked barefoot inside the house. After that footprint on the sink, something inside me snapped. I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow. Couldn't eat properly, lived with deep dark circles under my eyes, heart racing at the slightest noise. I became a ghost of myself, and no one seemed to notice. Not even my coworkers, who saw my pale face every day. Deep down I knew Roberto wasn't just playing at watching me. He was invading, slowly, silently. I decided to request a department transfer. Made up a story about wanting to explore other areas of the company. By some stroke of luck, I got moved to a department on the upper floor. More people, more movement. I thought it would bring me some relief. But the following week, I saw Roberto in the elevator. I stepped in, and he was already there, standing in the corner like he'd been waiting. He smiled, a smile that didn't match the moment. Heard you moved. But it's a small place, right? We always run into each other. I got off a floor early, just to get away. I started feeling sick every time I heard the elevator doors open. At home, I installed another camera, this time in the living room. It was the only way I could get even a little sleep. I started checking the footage daily, like a ritual. For a while, nothing happened. Until one early Sunday morning, I found something. Someone had been inside my house. The recording clearly showed a figure entering through the living room window, carrying a flashlight. They moved with a disturbing calm, scanning the room, touching things on the shelf. At one point, they stopped in front of the camera, stood still for several seconds, then slowly walked up and covered the lens with a dark cloth. I called the police that same day. But with no face, no fingerprints, no signs of forced entry. Once again, they told me to increase my security and stay alert. By that point, I was starting to wonder if a body on the floor was the only way someone would believe me. That's when I decided to leave. I quit my job. Handed in my resignation with a tight knot in my chest, but a bitter certainty. Either I left, or something much worse was going to happen. I packed in 2 days. Told no one where I was going. Hit the road with a new phone number, a rental under a fake name, everything arranged through a cousin. That first night in the new house, I lay down and finally felt peace, a quiet kind of emptiness. For the first time in months, I slept without a knife nearby, but it didn't last. The next morning, there was an envelope under the door. Inside, a single sheet of paper with letters cut out from magazines, glued carefully. I like your choice. The city really is beautiful. My body locked up. The hand holding the paper shook so badly, I had to lean against the wall. I sank to the floor and started laughing. A weak, broken laugh, almost hysterical. Because in that moment, I knew something no change of address could erase. He was never far. He was just waiting for me to settle again. Since that envelope, I haven't been able to feel alone. Even when no one's around. The new city, which once seemed promising, quickly turned into another field of paranoia. I started noticing cars parked for too long, people who stared a little too long, shadows that seemed to follow me, even under the sun. I installed sensors, more cameras, alarms, double locks on the door. None of it mattered. One night, during a call with my sister, the line suddenly went dead. I thought it was just bad reception. But within seconds, a deep breathing sound came through on the other end. It wasn't a glitch. It was someone breathing, slowly. Deliberately, like they wanted me to hear it, and I did. I recorded the audio. I still listen to it sometimes, just to remind myself it wasn't in my head. I went to the local police, showed them everything, the note, the audio, the videos. They filed a report, but they said that without direct threats or clear evidence, it was hard to take action, and I understood. After all, he never wanted to get caught. He enjoyed the game. I started documenting everything. Short videos detailing the sightings, the sounds, the notes. A way to keep myself sane, or to leave a trail in case one day I disappear. But the worst part is that over time, I stopped feeling afraid. I started accepting that this was my new life. That somewhere, he was watching me. That he knew my routines, my roots, my new preferences. And that at any moment, he could remind me of that. And then came the final proof. I got an email. No sender, no subject. Just an audio file attached. I put in my headphones, stomach already churning. When I hit play, I heard my own voice. It was a recording of me, a conversation I had with a friend inside my house. The recording could only have been made with a microphone very close by, but what froze my blood was the end. After my voice faded out, another came in, deep, soft, male. It simply said, "You don't need to run, I'm already here." These days, I avoid mirrors. I avoid open windows. Sleeping is hard. But living without knowing when the next time will be is worse. Maybe you think this is just another story. Maybe you think it's exaggerated, that no one could pull all of this off without being caught. But I'm here, telling you. Because if one day you feel like someone's watching you, maybe they are. And maybe he already knows your name.